Colorado suddenly changes its vaccination plan, opening up shots to a ton of people without a plan to do it. The governor gets the credit, Coloradans get the chaos. And the most important question is tougher to answer. When will people actually get the vaccine? The plan to detect the new mutated version of COVID confirmed in Colorado before anywhere else in America. The state's history museum realizes history's great, but people need help now, so they made a shift. Looks like Colorado may let its eviction moratorium expire tomorrow. I've got an idea tonight on how we can directly help families with children who will be forced out of their homes soon. Because you all don't just watch. This is next. Colorado is changing the rules for vaccines again. The shift from the governor today blindsided public health providers who suddenly got a wave of people 70 plus who had been told by the governor that they were immediately eligible to get a vaccine. There's not currently a plan for that. Democratic Governor Jared Polis announced that the state was moving on to Phase 1B before it finished 1A and moving up people 70 plus along with a slew of essential workers. And those vaccinations can start now. Our Steve Steger talked with public health leaders scrambling today to catch up with the governor's announcement.
Today, we are updating and entering in many parts of our state Phase 1B.
Phase 1B looks a lot different than it did just weeks ago.
Any Coloradan 70 and up can now legally receive the vaccine.
Coloradans over the age of 70 now join non-frontline healthcare workers and first responders in this adapted second phase of the vaccine rollout in Colorado. Along with them, essential workers moved up. Teachers, grocery store workers, bus drivers, and train operators, to name a few. Even government leaders and some frontline journalists.
Starting today, many areas of the state are moving to 1B.
It's an announcement that caught local public health leaders, the ones in charge of figuring out how to get the vaccine out, completely off guard. Phones began ringing nearly nonstop at health agencies and doctors' offices. Someone even showed up at the Pueblo County Health Department to try to get the vaccine.
I think we really do have to work on logistics about how to get the vaccine to individuals over the age of 70.
Dr. Anuj Mehta with Denver Health has advised CDPHE on vaccine guidance, but even he didn't know this was coming.
As information becomes available, they're going to start communicating it in terms of where you can get the vaccine.
Many are questioning how the state is ready to move to 1B when a lot of 1A people living and working in long-term care facilities are still waiting on their turn. The first clinics for those facilities started just 2 days ago.
There's just a lot of confusion and a lot of wondering and frustration that they're seeing folks in 1B now getting access to that vaccine before they do.
Lafayette Mayor Jamie Harkins has been trying to get information for long-term care facilities in her city, some of which don't have a date for their vaccine clinic yet. The state says the vaccines have been allocated. It's just a matter of getting the dates scheduled with pharmacies.
They were given a lot of hope in that 1A group, so I'm just really anxious for those vaccines to get out to them.
The public health departments I talked to in the metro area today say they are not done with 1A yet. Very hard to tell where they are just because they have to talk to so many different people involved in that process. Now, all of them are saying now that they're working pretty hard to try to figure out how to implement these new changes and get these vaccines to people 70 and over. They might do it through mass vaccination sites where people almost can drive up and you get a shot. They might partner with local agencies within their jurisdiction. It's going to be different in all cases. And as we heard the doctor say there, the best thing you can do instead of calling is just to try to keep an eye out on your local health department's website of how you might be able to get this.
Just brutally frustrating for people, Steve. We've been asked all day long, where can I get my vaccine? Governor told me I can get a vaccine. And I've heard as well, guessing you have too, from people who are tied to some of these long-term care facilities who are furious that their residents, isolated, alone, on lockdown because they are the most at risk, are about to see on television as a bunch of other people get the vaccine before they do because they've been scheduled out weeks from now.
Yeah, it's disheartening for those people who've essentially been locked in their bedrooms for 9 months waiting for something like this. They see that light and they're offered this opportunity and they don't get a chance to get it right away. What I'm being told in a lot of cases is this has to do with the federal contracts with the pharmacies who are in charge of getting this vaccine out to these different facilities, that all of that vaccine has almost been allotted, and now they're just trying to get these clinics scheduled so that they can get folks and workers vaccinated inside those facilities.
Well, as the next week or two goes along, if people in Phase 1A, these long-term care facilities, are not getting the vaccines that they were promised in order, I encourage people to continue making noise. Steve and I are both listening. We'll try to elevate those concerns. Steve, thank you. So, randomly tucked into the middle of the governor's briefing to journalists today was that the two cases of the mutated strain of COVID, the first ones reported in America, the ones here in Colorado, that they're National Guard members who were sent out to help a nursing home where every single resident has tested positive. This is in Simla in Elbert County. So here's how the search for this variant is going. State Lab pulls random samples. They've been doing this for more than a week, looking for this new strain that was first seen in the UK. Only the State Lab has the ability to do this right now.
Hospitals don't do viral cultures, and hospitals don't sequence the entire virus. We just look for those short little sections that are characteristic of the COVID virus. So those tests wouldn't be able to tell us, is this the original COVID or is this a variant COVID?
You got to remember, this new variant, it spreads more easily, but it's no more serious, and it should be covered by the vaccine. Colorado's COVID hospitalization numbers continue to drop from their all-time highs, down to 1,045 patients today. That's a few dozen fewer than yesterday. A one-day jump in new cases came in above our weekly average, 1,800 new ones in a day. Average for the last week is 1,700 new cases daily. Our daily positivity rate average came in higher than usual again. 8.5% of tests came back positive at last check, and that pulls our weekly average up a bit to 6.6%. Tonight's next question comes from a viewer named Jody. With all the talk about COVID, Jody was curious about what the flu has been like in Colorado this season. Jody, hospitalizations from the flu in Colorado are down nearly 98% this year compared to last. Only 14 people, according to the state. This time last year, it was 685 patients. And Colorado has not seen a child die of the flu this year. Last season, there were 3 child deaths at this point. It's about the annual average. The state does not release numbers on adult flu deaths. The vanishing flu season makes a lot of sense when you talk to the medical experts. They say, considering the social distancing and the mask wearing and the hand washing. And the reason that we're seeing far more COVID than flu is because despite what your uncle posted on Facebook, COVID is way more dangerous and serious than the flu. Colorado's eviction moratorium has kind of shadowed the federal ban on evictions moving along month by month, though it looks like Governor Polis might let the state moratorium end tomorrow. That'd be a month before the end of the federal prohibition on evictions. His spokeswoman said today, quote, "With congressional action and the resources coming to Colorado from the federal bill, coupled with the state resources provided through the recent special session, we are reviewing whether any further administrative actions are necessary." Tomorrow is decision day on Colorado's eviction moratorium. So there are some new state and federal resources to keep people from getting kicked out of their homes or to help them when that happens. And there are also nonprofits that are bracing for a wave of families being pushed out of their homes over the next few months. So what do you say together we help them assist a whole lot more families in our community? The word of thanks that comes to mind when I think of Family Promise is home. Family Promise helps families in the Denver metro area who are homeless find temporary housing and then helps to get them into a permanent home. They're preparing for a surge in need when this federal eviction moratorium is lifted at the end of January. There are going to be families too far behind on rent and mortgages that'll be forced out of their homes. Our donations this week help those families bridge the gap from home to home, paying not just for the temporary shelter in a motel or a hotel, but also application fees for a new place, groceries, stuff that we might not think of, like clean clothes. It's the essentials, so that these families with children can live safely and with dignity after they're forced out of one home and while Family Promise is helping to find their next home. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, I will send you that link to donate. I will never ask you to give if I don't first, so I'll match the first 50 donations of $5. When these eviction moratoriums are eventually lifted, we are going to start hearing and seeing some heartbreaking stories. And we'll know we didn't just watch, we did something to help those families. It's the year we can't wait to forget. It's their job to remember it and to help us do the same.
What is a museum? What is our role? What is our civic role, especially during the pandemic?
It meant History Colorado also took on an unusual role this year. Hey, speaking of unusual, how about a business that's thriving?
Lucky, blessed, all of it.
And ready to extend that good fortune around town. That's next.
Beautiful sunshine and 40s today, and now clear and cold tonight with that big moon just past full. Our high temperature today at 44 after a chilly start. The low this morning at DIA was 7. We have a nice warming trend even though we're in between two storm systems. The next storm approaching will bring in high and mid-level clouds and a little bit of mountain snow, but not much for Denver. As a matter of fact, heading into New Year's, it'll be a clear, cold evening and a sunny and cooler Friday. Tonight, we do have fair skies and low 20s for you. Tomorrow is sunshine for New Year's Eve day, mid-40s with evening temperatures in the 20s. As I mentioned, a little cooler, but we've got sunshine for New Year's Day. First few days of the new month and the new year, sunshine and 50 degrees.
As History Colorado, our state's main museum, set out to capture 2020, its role shifted. Beyond collecting stories for the future, History Colorado found some purpose in the present as a friendly listener to those dealing with social isolation and as a resource to those working with minority communities. Here's Anusha Roy.
More than 100 years ago, Marisa Volpe's great-grandmother
died of the pandemic in 1918. She was a Spanish immigrant. She was a domestic, so she cared for children in a home, like for a family. And she died very quietly, unnoticed.
More than 100 years later, Volpe found herself living through a pandemic herself, tasked with capturing what happened this year.
Where were underrepresented communities? Where were the stories of folks who were not at the center? And so I think History Colorado made it a really big priority to say, history's not going to repeat itself in that way, shall we say.
So History Colorado made sure that this time they were going into communities that had been overlooked, partnering with artists to reflect racial injustice and forming relationships so people would trust them with their stories.
Partnering, for instance, with the Roaring Fork Valley, a very strong immigrant Latino community.
And while the idea was preserving history so kids could learn what 2020 was like a century later, the impact is being felt now.
One group of women, Mujeres Valientes, a Latina group, said, this is great. We're going to give you these stories and these, our histories. Could we get that information because we're also applying for grants to help serve these communities?
COVID.
People were invited to leave voicemails.
My school.
Volunteers called older adults to hear their stories. People who in return were grateful for a chance to talk.
So that became a chance for people in isolation to share their stories and talk to someone when maybe they were feeling a little bit lonely, which turned out to be a really great resource for them. History Colorado also worked with a whole bunch of different people, the Denver Islamic Center. They were even working with teachers, Kyle, to get stories and poems, even songs from kids to make sure that we were capturing what this year was like through their eyes as well.
Are they still taking if somebody wants to download some memories?
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to just stop this with the new year, right? They want as many stories as possible, multiple languages. You can email it in, you can mail stuff in, and there's a lot of different ways on their website to make this as socially distant and physically distant friendly as possible.
All right, Nusha, thank you. How about a change of pace? A business that's doing well and using that good fortune to help others in the community.
We have more than we could ask for right now, and I couldn't imagine having less than what I needed.
Coming down the home stretch of 2020 with gratitude and generosity. Next. Pre-pandemic, restaurants were such an engine of community involvement. You know, always among the first called on to help with some charitable effort, whatever's going on in the neighborhood, around town. And now we see them jumping right back into chances to give as soon as they're able to find a way to get their footing with their business. Our Mike Grady found an example in Parker.
We didn't close for a day. We at least kept the drive-through window open.
The bagel stop in Parker is doing a pretty good job surviving the pandemic.
Lucky, blessed, all of it.
Owners Keaton Ainsworth and his wife Katie appreciate their good fortune.
We have more than we could ask for right now, and I couldn't imagine having less than what I needed.
So 3 weeks ago, they started whipping up more than bagels in their kitchen.
Classic roast beef with vegetables in a slow braise it all day tomorrow.
The veteran chef,
it's so good,
wanted to give people in need a taste of his talent.
That was the mission was just to make some really, really, really good food and box it up and take it downtown.
With donations from customers, their community, and colleagues,
something that my food purveyor dropped off,
they've shared more than 500 meals. But didn't stop there.
We also have been making care packages for people with toiletries, blankets, sleeping bags, anything that might make someone's life a little bit better.
The Bagel Stop's mission won't wind down with 2020.
The next 3 to 4 months are when the people that need things are going to need them more than ever.
They'll continue helping people with a little less luck persevere.
There is no end to this until there's an end to this. So
for Next, I'm Mike Grady.
Good people everywhere. Hey, speaking of, our chance to work together to help families with children who are going to be facing the end of eviction moratorium soon. That is next. Colorado's eviction moratorium may be allowed to expire tomorrow. Federal ban ends January 31st. There are some new state and federal resources to help people, and there are also nonprofits in our community ready to keep families from falling through the cracks into homelessness. That's why our Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign this week is supporting a nonprofit called Family Promise. They quickly get families in the Denver metro area into safe temporary housing when they're evicted and then work with them to find a long-term place to stay. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. I'll send you that link to join me in donating. This nonprofit knows they've got a lot of work ahead in the next few months, but I told them that help was on the way because the group of people who watch this program come through every time. Every time. Kendrick writes in tonight, asks us to keep the number up longer. Kendrick, here's the secret. We use the same number every week, so if you jot it down or you put it in your phone, you can just go back to it every single week. The number doesn't change, just the link that we send you to donate. And finally tonight, want to close with a word about somebody who has helped to bring this program to you for the last 4+ years. Les works behind the scenes at 9 News, but more than that, he has been a constant source of stories that he thought might catch your attention and a wonderful source of encouragement to everybody on the next team, even back when this show was kind of a disaster. Les, best wishes in retirement. See you next time.